the second most powerful person in America, is addressing 50 nations about silver. Vice President JD Vance is standing at a podium in the State Department in Washington. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is hosting the event. Special Assistant to the President for Global Supply Chains David C. Play is in attendance. Undersecretary for Economic Affairs Jacob Hellberg is presenting, and the subject they're discussing in that room has the power to reshape global trade, entire industries, determine which technologies advance, and decide which nations control the economic architecture of the next decade. This is not a conference about mining trends. This is not routine diplomatic ceremony. This is economic warfare, disguised as international cooperation. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why silver just stopped being merely a commodity and became a geopolitical weapon in the largest resource war since the Cold War. Look, everyone saw Friday's crash. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why silver just stopped being merely a commodity and became a geopolitical weapon in the largest resource war since the Cold War. Thoughtful. Look, everyone saw Friday's crash. Silver dropped from $121.30 to $78.53 in a single trading session. 37% evaporated in hours. Spot silver down 28%. Futures down 31.4%. The worst single day since March 1980 when the Hunt Brothers Corner attempt collapsed. Over $7 trillion in combined precious metals value destroyed. Margin calls cascading. Forced liquidations triggering more forced liquidations. The entire derivative structure in silver nearly broke. But what almost nobody noticed was what appeared on Sunday, quietly, without fanfare. The State Department website published an announcement, and when you read it carefully, the implications are staggering. Today, Wednesday, February 4th, 2026, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will host the inaugural Critical Minerals Ministerial at the Department of State. Read that word again slowly. Inaugural. This is the first time in American history that 50 nations are gathering at this level, with this participation, to discuss mineral supply chains as a matter of national security. The United States will welcome delegations from over 50 nations to advance collective efforts to strengthen and diversify critical mineral supply chains. 50 countries, not a working group of 5, not a regional conference of 10. 50 sovereign nations, sending ministerial-level delegations to Washington. This historic gathering will create momentum for collaboration to secure these critical components vital to technological innovation, economic strength, and national security. 3 words that change everything: national security. When the American government uses that exact phrase in an official State Department release, they're not talking about consumer electronics production. They're not discussing industrial efficiency. They're not concerned with corporate supply chains. They're talking about survival resources. Resources so absolutely essential that the nation cannot defend itself, cannot power its economy, cannot maintain technological leadership, cannot function as a superpower without continuous access to them. And who's speaking right now as I record this? Vice President Vance, the second highest elected official in the United States government. Secretary Rubio, the nation's top diplomat. David C. Play, the president's personal advisor on supply chain strategy. Jacob Hellberg, the undersecretary responsible for economic warfare and sanctions architecture. This is not a working group of mid-level bureaucrats. This is not an industry summit with corporate representatives. This is not a policy conference with think tank experts. This is a strategic mobilization of the highest levels of American power. 9 o'clock this morning, Washington time. The doors opened at the State Department. Ministers from 50 nations walked in. And now, as you're watching this, they're in that room, implementing America's plan to secure silver and break China's stranglehold on the global supply chain. Before we go further, consider this. Because what's unfolding in Washington today will determine who wins the new resource war. And if you don't understand what's happening in that room, you cannot protect yourself from what's coming next. Now, let me show you exactly why silver qualifies for this meeting, and why it's become a national security priority. What makes a mineral critical? According to the U.S. Geological Survey, which spent years developing the scientific methodology for this determination, critical minerals must meet 3 specific conditions simultaneously. Condition 1. The mineral must be essential to economic or national security. Not just useful, not just beneficial, not just cost-effective. Essential, meaning the economy or defense systems cannot function without it. Silver was officially added to the USGS critical minerals list on November 7, 2025. For the first time in American history, the United States government formally classified silver as a national security priority at the federal level. This wasn't a political decision. This was a scientific determination, based on supply chain vulnerability assessment and economic impact modeling. The implications are profound. Military applications, TERS, Naval defense systems integrate silver throughout their electrical architecture because corrosion resistance in saltwater environments is mission critical. Satellite communications depend on silver components because thermal cycling in space demands materials that won't degrade. Military aircraft avionic systems use silver extensively. Defense contractors cannot build sophisticated weapons platforms without continuous silver supply. There is no substitute material that provides the necessary combination of electrical conductivity, thermal performance, and reliability under combat conditions. Industrial applications beyond defense. Solar photovoltaic panels cannot function without silver paste for electrical conductivity. The solar industry alone now consumes over 200 million ounces annually. That number is projected to exceed 400 million ounces by 2030 as installation rates accelerate. 5G cellular infrastructure requires silver in every connection point. The signal frequencies and data transmission speeds demand materials with electrical properties that only silver provides. Each 5G tower uses approximately 10 times more silver than previous generation 4G towers. Electric vehicle manufacturing depends on silver for high current electrical contacts, battery management systems, power distribution networks within the vehicle architecture. Medical equipment uses silver for antibacterial properties in surgical instruments, wound dressings, and diagnostic devices. Advanced electronics manufacturing for artificial intelligence chips, high-performance computing, and data center infrastructure all require silver. You cannot build the technologies that define modern economic competitiveness without it. Condition 2. The supply chain must be vulnerable to disruption. Here's the part that should genuinely terrify anyone paying attention to geopolitical risk. China controls between 60 and 70% of global silver refining capacity, not 60 to 70% of mining, refining. The distinction is critical. Raw ore comes out of the ground in Mexico, Peru, Australia, Poland, and dozens of other countries, but that ore must be refined into pure silver before it can be used in manufacturing, and China built the refining infrastructure over 3 decades to dominate that choke point. The United States currently imports 66% of its silver consumption. We are a net importer. We consume far more than we produce domestically. Mexico and Peru are the top producers of silver ore globally, but much of that ore gets shipped to China for refining before it comes back to Western markets as finished metal. One nation controls the processing bottleneck. One nation can turn off the tap. One nation holds leverage over the entire downstream supply chain. Condition 3. No easy substitutes available. This is where silver becomes truly irreplaceable in modern technology. Silver is the single most electrically conductive element on the periodic table. Nothing conducts electricity better. Not copper, not gold, not any engineered material or alloy. Silver sets the physical limit. Solar panels require silver paste on photovoltaic cells to collect and transmit the electrical current generated when sunlight hits the silicon. Engineers have tried for decades to find alternatives. Copper-based pastes, aluminum compounds, nickel alloys, all of them reduce panel efficiency by 5 to 15%. In an industry where every fraction of a percentage point matters for economic viability, that performance degradation is unacceptable. There is no commercially viable substitute. 5G telecommunications infrastructure depends on silver's high-frequency electrical properties. At the signal frequencies used for 5G data transmission, even minor increases in electrical resistance cause signal degradation and data loss. Silver is not just the best option, it's the only option that meets technical specifications. Electric vehicle battery systems use silver in high-current disconnect switches and bus bars, because the thermal and electrical loads require materials that won't fail. A single EV contains between 25 and 50 grams of silver, depending on the platform. Medical and industrial applications leverage silver's natural antibacterial properties. Silver ions disrupt bacterial cell membranes. This is not a coating or treatment that can be substituted. This is a fundamental property of the element itself. You cannot engineer around physics. You cannot innovate around chemistry. You cannot substitute around the periodic table. Silver is not optional. It's structural to modern industrial civilization. Now watch what happens when you plot the timeline and pay very close attention to the dates, because the sequence reveals coordination. January 2nd through 26th, 2026. Institutional traders build massive short positions in silver futures. Open interest increases dramatically. The setup is being constructed in plain sight on the COMEX. January 29th, Thursday. Silver hits $121.30 per ounce. All-time high in nominal terms. Retail investors are celebrating. Social media influencers are screaming about silver going to $200, $300 to the moon. Momentum traders are piling in. The euphoria is palpable. Everyone thinks the rally will continue forever. January 30th, Friday. The hammer drops. Silver crashes 31.4% in futures markets to settle at $78.53. Spot plummets 28% to $83.45. The largest one-day percentage drop since March 1980, when the Hunt brothers' attempted corner of the silver market collapsed under regulatory pressure. Over $7 trillion in combined precious metals market capitalization, destroyed in a single session. But it wasn't just price movement. The CME Group, which operates the COMEX Futures Exchange, announces emergency margin requirement increases. Maintenance margins for silver futures jumped 36% effective Monday, February 2nd. This forces leveraged long positions to either post massive additional collateral immediately, or liquidate. Most cannot post the additional capital. Forced selling cascades through the market. Each wave of liquidations triggers stop-loss orders. Those stop-losses trigger more margin calls. The feedback loop accelerates. Market makers step back. Liquidity evaporates. The crash intensifies. But here's what nobody connected at the time. February 2nd, Monday, 2 trading days after the crash, the State Department publishes the announcement about today's Ministerial, the inaugural Critical Minerals Ministerial. 50 nations, February 4th, critical minerals including silver, national security language. The announcement reveals that this meeting has been planned for weeks, possibly months. You do not organize a ministerial-level gathering of 50 nations in 2 days. The logistics are impossible. Ministers need travel authorization from their home governments. Security clearances must be processed. Diplomatic credentials must be verified. Hotel accommodations for 50 delegations must be arranged. Agendas must be negotiated between all parties. Translation services must be coordinated. Meeting rooms must be secured. This takes weeks minimum, more likely months of advanced planning. February 4th, today, Wednesday, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. 50 nations convene at the State Department. Vice President Vance delivers opening remarks. Secretary Rubio hosts. The agenda focuses on strengthening and diversifying critical mineral supply chains, with explicit national security framing. 4 days total from the crash to the meeting. 4 days. You're telling me that within 4 business days of the largest silver crash in 46 years, the United States convenes an emergency meeting with 50 countries, specifically about critical minerals, and silver is officially on that critical minerals list. Let me be absolutely clear about what this timeline proves. This meeting was not organized last week in response to the crash. This meeting was not hastily assembled over the weekend. This meeting was scheduled in December 2025, or January 2026, at the latest, which means when they set this date, and sent out the invitations, and finalized the agenda, they already knew something significant was going to happen to silver prices. They knew silver was going to move violently, and they knew it was going to crash before today's meeting. The timing is not coincidental. The timing is coordinated. The timing reveals preparation. The official State Department language uses carefully chosen diplomatic phrasing, strengthen and diversify supply chains. Those words sound cooperative. They sound reasonable. They sound like standard multilateral trade policy. But when you understand the context, when you know what's happening behind the language, the translation becomes very different. Let me decode what strengthen and diversify actually means in terms of silver specifically. Strengthen supply chains. Surface translation. Improve reliability and resilience of existing supply networks. Actual translation: we need dramatically more silver immediately, and we need guaranteed access to that supply, regardless of geopolitical conditions. Why the urgency? Because industrial demand is exploding beyond all previous projections, and the math no longer works. Solar panel installation rates doubled in 2025, compared to 2024. Every panel requires silver. There is no substitute. The solar industry is now the single largest consumer of silver globally, at over 200 million ounces per year, and that figure is accelerating. Projections show solar demand alone could reach 400 million ounces annually by 2030. That's more than 1/3 of total current global mine supply, going to just one sector. Electric vehicle production is scaling faster than supply chains can match. Each EV contains 25 to 50 grams of silver in battery disconnect systems and electrical contactors. Global EV production exceeded 20 million units in 2025, and is projected to hit 40 million units by 2028. That incremental demand adds another 60 million ounces of silver consumption annually. 5G telecommunications infrastructure build-out requires 10 times more silver per tower than 4G infrastructure. The signal frequencies and data rates demand materials with electrical properties that only silver can provide. The United States, Europe, Japan, and allied nations are racing to build domestic 5G networks to avoid dependence on Chinese telecommunications equipment. Every tower installation increases silver demand. Military modernization programs across NATO and allied nations are consuming existing stockpiles. Modern hypersonic missiles use more silver than previous generation systems, because the guidance electronics must function at higher speeds and temperatures. Naval vessels are integrating more sophisticated radar and communications arrays. All of them depend on silver. Military aerospace programs for 6th-generation fighter aircraft require silver throughout their avionics and electronic warfare systems. Defense contractors are reporting difficulty securing sufficient silver supply for contracted deliveries. This is not a projection, this is happening now. The United States military-industrial base does not have enough silver to meet production schedules. That's a national security crisis. By definition, diversify supply chains, surface translation, reduce concentration risk by sourcing from multiple geographic regions. Actual translation, we cannot allow China to control 70% of refining capacity, because that gives Beijing leverage to shut down American and allied industrial production, whenever geopolitical tensions escalate, and those tensions are escalating rapidly. Taiwan remains the single greatest flashpoint for potential military conflict between the United States and China. If Beijing moves on Taiwan, the first response will not be military, it will be economic. China will embargo critical materials to Western nations, rare earths first, then tungsten, gallium, germanium, and silver. The precedent exists. In 2010, China restricted rare earth exports to Japan during a territorial dispute over the Senkaku Islands. Japanese high-tech manufacturing nearly stopped. The message was clear: China will weaponize resource control when it serves strategic interests. The South China Sea is seeing increased military confrontations between Chinese forces and American allies. Philippines, Vietnam, Japan. Every incident increases the probability of broader conflict. Trade relationships are fracturing. The Trump administration is implementing tariffs and trade restrictions. China is retaliating. The post-Cold War era of integrated global supply chains is ending. We are entering an era of economic blocs. Western allied nations versus China and its allied states. And in that environment, control over critical materials becomes a weapon more powerful than missiles. If China decides to restrict silver exports from its refineries, using the same licensing system it implemented on January 1, 2026, American technology production and defense manufacturing has approximately 6 to 8 weeks of buffer from existing inventories. Then everything stops. Factories shut down. Defense contractors cannot fulfill Pentagon orders. Solar panel installation halts. 5G build-out freezes. Electric vehicle production lines go idle. That scenario is not hypothetical. That scenario is the strategic vulnerability that today's meeting exists to address. The United States is organizing 50 allied nations to build parallel refining infrastructure outside of Chinese control, before Beijing can exploit that leverage. Here's what makes the timing and structure of this meeting even more calculated and revealing. China is almost certainly not invited to participate in today's Ministerial. How can I be confident about that assessment when the State Department hasn't published the full participant list? Because the language and framework match exactly the architecture of the Mineral Security Partnership. That's the international alliance the United States launched specifically and explicitly to build critical mineral supply chains that bypass Chinese control. The meeting announcement uses the precise diplomatic phrasing that signals this intent: strengthen and diversify. In international trade diplomacy, that combination of words has become code language for anything but China. It's sometimes called friend-shoring, sometimes called ally-shoring. The concept is identical. Build supply chains exclusively with nations that share Western political alignment, and will not cut off supply during geopolitical conflicts. What this means in practical implementation for silver: the United States is using today's Ministerial to organize 50 allied nations to accomplish 4 specific strategic objectives. Objective 1. Source silver ore from non-China suppliers and formalize long-term purchase commitments. Prioritize production from Mexico, Peru, Australia, Poland, Canada, and other aligned nations. Sign multi-year supply agreements that guarantee ore will flow to Western-aligned refineries, rather than being sold to Chinese processors. Objective 2. Build new refining capacity in allied nations to break China's 70% processing monopoly. Move refining operations out of Chinese facilities and into American-controlled or allied infrastructure. This requires massive capital investment. Refining facilities cost billions to construct and take years to commission, but the alternative is permanent strategic vulnerability. Poland is already expanding silver refining capacity. Mexico is being courted aggressively to build domestic refining, to process its own ore rather than shipping it to China. Objective 3. Create strategic reserves of physical silver that Beijing cannot access or manipulate. Stockpile refined metal in secure facilities in the United States and allied nations. Think of it as a silver equivalent to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Buffer inventory to ensure military and critical industrial production can continue, even if China embargoes exports. The USGS and Department of Defense are reportedly developing recommendations for stockpile targets. Objective 4. Establish long-term purchase agreements with Western-aligned mining companies at negotiated fixed prices. Lock in supply and pricing through multi-year contracts. Reduce exposure to spot market volatility and potential Chinese price manipulation. Provide mining companies with guaranteed revenue that justifies expansion of production capacity. And the United States is implementing this entire strategic framework immediately after silver crashed 37% from peak. Think carefully about the optics and the negotiating leverage. If you're the United States government, and you're going to secure multi-year silver supply agreements with 50 allied nations, when exactly do you want to negotiate those contracts? When silver is trading at $121 per ounce at all-time highs, or when silver just crashed to $78 and everyone is uncertain about whether the price will recover? The answer is obvious. You negotiate when prices are low and sentiment is fearful. You lock in favorable terms when sellers are desperate for long-term commitments. Let me walk you through what I believe actually happened based on the timeline, the price action, and the documented facts. December 2025, the United States State Department schedules the inaugural Critical Minerals Ministerial for February 4, 2026. Invitations are sent to 50 allied nations. The agenda is finalized. The topic is critical mineral supply chain security, with explicit focus on reducing Chinese dependency. Silver is on the official USGS critical minerals list as of November. It's a primary focus of the Ministerial. January 2026. Silver begins a parabolic rally. Prices surge from $71 per ounce to $121.30, a 70% gain in less than 4 weeks. Retail investors pile in, momentum traders add leverage, social media creates FOMO. The rally becomes self-reinforcing, but there's a problem from the United States government perspective. If today's Ministerial happens with silver at $121, every supply contract, every reserve purchase agreement, every long-term commitment gets negotiated at inflated prices. Think about the math. If the United States wants to secure a 10-year strategic reserve agreement for 1 billion ounces, which is roughly 10 months of global mine production, and a reasonable buffer for critical industrial needs, the cost at $121 per ounce is $121 billion. That's real money, even for the federal government, especially when you're also trying to secure copper, lithium, rare earths, and 30 other critical minerals simultaneously. Solution: crash the price before the meeting. January 30th, Friday, CME announces emergency margin requirement increases. 36% higher maintenance margins for silver, effective Monday. This forces leveraged speculators to either post massive additional collateral immediately or liquidate positions. Most cannot post the capital. The selling begins. Institutional short sellers who built positions throughout January add pressure. Algorithmic trading systems detect the breakdown and trigger automated selling. Stop losses cascade. Market makers step back. Liquidity evaporates. Silver plunges 31.4% in futures markets. February 4th. Today the Ministerial happens as scheduled. 50 nations are now negotiating supply frameworks, reserve purchases, and long-term contracts at $78 instead of $121. Let me show you the exact savings on that hypothetical 10-year 1 billion ounce strategic agreement. At $121 per ounce, total cost is $121 billion. At $78 per ounce, total cost is $78 billion. The difference is $43 billion in savings. 43 billion. That's the GDP of a medium-sized nation. That's enough to fund the construction of multiple new silver refining facilities in allied countries. That's enough to provide loan guarantees to Western mining companies to expand production. Now, Friday's crash doesn't look like random market forces or natural profit-taking after a parabolic rally. It looks like strategic preparation for the largest coordinated mineral supply negotiation in modern history. Right now, at this exact moment, here's what I'm watching for in that room. Signal 1. The language used in opening remarks. If Vance or Rubio mention supply security, that's bullish long-term for physical silver. It means they're confirming shortages. If they mention price stability, that means they want control over pricing mechanisms. If they mention strategic reserves, that means massive government buying is coming. Signal 2. Which countries are most engaged?